Um, it's a time of so many transitions right now. And, even Daniel and I were just speaking a moment ago about just the nature of transition and how much of it is happening in our life, chosen, not chosen, of our not doing. And, one of the things that I've just noticed is that, uh, the one thing that almost feels solid in these times are stories. It's like they are this constant in a time of nonstop change. And I think one of the things that's really real is that there are these moments in time when we need to have the tools to call upon. Like we need to have the tools in our toolbox to call upon. And so it's in moments like this when I'm really grateful to have people like Daniel Ellison in the house, who has made, a real commitment of study of story. And just a few moments before you all came in, he was just sharing just briefly about this opening that he had at a Martin Shaw workshop, and how certain moments, like when we're ready for change, a story can meet us in a way that maybe even the story might have come to us before, but now all of a sudden we're ready for it. And so I just am so grateful to be with a storied man, a man who is in a long-term committed relationship with story. I'll read you a little bit of his bio. I'm sure you've seen it, but I'll also just remind you of the presence that we're in. He's a best-selling author, storyteller, and podcaster who's woven his spells in schools, prisons, global festivals, jungle huts, and I don't know if I can pronounce this, Hebridean hilltops. You have to tell me if I said.
Hebridean.
Thank you, Hebridean. Daniel hosts the House of Legends podcast and is the founder of the Roundhouse Storytelling School, a unique online school for storytellers. And he's the author of Scottish Myths and Legends, Finn and the Fianna, and the Orkney Cycle of Silverhorn. Silverhorn. You
And
guys,
Silverborn.
Silverborn. Okay. I've just heard I have to wear glasses. This is still a new experience for me that I'm not used to having to wear glasses while reading these kinds of things. And so when performing live, Daniel brings together a unique combination of Celtic myths, indigenous tribal tales, and virtuoso didgeridoo playing. He's lived in Uganda, India, Nepal, and Thailand, and now divides his time between Scotland and Thailand. And we have this unique opportunity to be in this really intimate way, which we don't normally get to be this intimate. And I'm trusting in the magic and the alchemy of this opportunity. And Daniel, thank you so much for bringing us into your relationship with creative mythology.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming along. It's really nice to see you, really nice to meet you. And I'm looking forward to diving in deeper. So, this workshop is about creative mythology. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a bit of a talk, a bit of a presentation from me on what I mean by creative mythology, because you could mean a lot of different things by that. It's been used in different ways. How I practice it, a few examples of how other people practice it. And then we're all going to get to work. We're all going to do some work on taking some stories and responding to them in different creative ways, perhaps through some poetry, perhaps through some sketching, perhaps through perhaps through writing a bit of fiction. We're gonna get outside of our own little boxes a little bit and hopefully find some ideas for things we would like to go away and carry on with. I love helping people with this kind of work. I love helping people find new creative practices, find ways to sustain or grow a creative practice, and to get fired up about not only their right to do this stuff, but how what a wonderful thing it is to do for themselves and for the world, to truly offer your act of devotion, which is your creativity, to whatever it is that you love. So we're going to get ahead and do it. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to have a few little slides. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Can I become a co-host, please?
You
So I can.
can. Hold on.
Should have asked you that earlier.
No, it's okay. And folks, I had to turn off Loca's video. When people move around a lot for the screen, it's really hard for the speaker, that whole peripheral vision piece. So that's why we ask that when you're on screen, that it's just like when we're in a group of circle of people, like your attention and focus calls out the sharing. And so it's really appreciated.
Okay. So can you see that? Creative mythology, tending the flames. Okay. So this is a quote. Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire. Or as I prefer to put it, working with tradition is about tending the flames, not worshipping the ashes. Someone's raised their hands. Yep, feel free to speak. Oh, okay. All right, I'll carry on then. There we are. So we're going to talk about what is creative mythology. We're going to talk about why we practice it, give some examples of creative mythology, address some concerns you may have around it, and then the main thrust of the workshop is there going to be some space to practice in your own way, alone and in a group. And then we're going to be sharing some of what we've created, and then we're going to close things up. So that's what we're doing today. So what is creative mythology? Now, I'm sure we're all aware that artists have taken inspiration from mythology for centuries. If you think of Botticelli's Birth of Venus and endless other works of art, endless rewritings of myths and legends that's for kids, for adults, all kinds of things. Is that what I'm talking about? No, not exactly. Creative mythology, the way I'm talking about it, is art made with intent and made with respect. Not saying that Botticelli didn't do that or anyone else didn't do that, but I've got a very particular idea. And you can use mythology as the basis for all kinds of art, but what I'm talking about is art that's made with a love of what you're taking as your inspiration. So if you're working with, say, Greek mythology, it's art that's born out of a deep love for that, and it's born out of an intent to engage with that tradition, to engage with those stories, and to feed, to serve that tradition, to become part of it. So creative mythology is devotional. It is really, I love this story. I love Athene. I love the story of Asipata, and I just have to respond to it just the way you have to say to your lover, I love you 10 million times, or the way you just feel that you have to bow down at this statue or wherever it might be. Creative mythology is regenerative. It's founded on the idea that, going back to that quote of it being about not worshipping the ashes but tending the fire needs tending, and that's what creative mythology is. It's your contribution to an ongoing, evolving tradition. Creative mythology is an offering at the altar of what you love. For me, it really is the same thing as if someone down the street from me is probably going to church on Sunday and singing whatever they sing in church. For me, it's the exact same thing what I do every morning, and it fulfills that need in me. That fills that need to make an offering at the altar of what I love. Quite simply, I can't put any better than that. And I would feel unhappy in my life, and I do feel unhappy in my life when I'm not writing, because my way of doing this is to write fiction, which feeds, is devoted to, and is regenerating the tradition that I love. So why practice creative mythology rather than a more direct engagement with, if we're talking about, say, gods and goddesses of a particular tradition, why not do more traditional devotional practices? If we're talking about stories, you might think more, well, why not just tell the stories as they are? For many of us, most of our traditions are lost. By that, I mean the larger part of the tradition which we come from or which we identify with is lost. And there can be a couple of different ways in which I might mean that. For many of the people I work with, and I perhaps I don't want to presume, but perhaps this includes you. I speak to a lot of people who are in the US, who are in Canada, who are in Australia, people who have Celtic roots, roots in Scotland, Ireland, and so on, so on, so on, who feel disconnected from the traditions which of their parents' parents, because they're on a different land, or they just feel they don't really know enough about it, these kinds of things. And so, I talk to a lot of people for whom that's a big longing, where they feel like they just haven't got that connection with their traditions because they're on a different land. And then what I end up saying a lot in these conversations, which people are sometimes surprised about, is that for someone like me who's loves Scottish traditions and is in Scotland, there's a lot of pain there too, because we lost almost everything. We don't know, we only know a couple of our gods and goddesses, for example. Most of our, almost all of our myths, our legends are gone. Most of our tradition is folk tales in terms of stories. It's pretty threadbare. In Ireland, it's a lot richer, but they know a lot of the gods and goddesses. They've got the mythological stories, they've got legendary stories, but of course, it was written. Most of those were written down by monks. It's very hard to know how much was changed, how much is what they call pseudo history. So it's very confusing. And even though they've got stories, a lot of traditions, spiritual practices, ritual ceremonies, and so on are gone. Similar story in Wales. I could go on, but I think you get what I'm talking about. Compared to other mythological spiritual traditions, we've really just not got that much. So it makes sense to me to acknowledge the pain of that loss, and I don't want to gloss over it or say there's, never mind, doesn't matter, because it does matter. But there is also for me there an invitation to do what I call dreaming into the gaps. Because there are these big shadow areas. If you think of these kind of threadbare tapestry that was once there, these big dark areas, why not do something there? Why not wander in and have an imagine about what might have been there? That is an invitation. And for those of us who like us, I'm sure we all like stories. For those of us who like stories, the good stories, there's usually a big monumental challenge in there, the ones that matter. There's something difficult. And going into those big empty spaces is difficult, it's daunting. And if you like a story, maybe you'll like that idea. Another reason is that tradition has always been a creative. I mean, I shouldn't say always because, yeah, I try not to avoid absolutes like that. But we find in so many mythological, legendary traditions this idea that you've got to invite the witch to the wedding. Loki needs to be in Asgard. There's got to be a fool in the card deck. You've got to have a streak of the subversive. You've got a streak of trickster energy in order for something to be alive and for it to have this edge of chaos and for potential for disruption, in order it to keep freshening itself up and in order to keep renewing. And it's one of those kind of basic laws, of mythology.
Hey, Daniel,
And yeah,
could you share? I mean, because that's such a great, I love this. The witch must be at the wedding. And it feels like, I don't know what it feels like. You're in Scotland right now, is that right?
yeah,
I don't know what it feels like in Scotland, but in the United States, it feels like we are so obsessed with our feeling safe, feeling secure, making sure that we're only surrounded by people that are like us, unlike anybody who's got a different perspective other than what we have. You think that way, well, then I don't have to listen to your perspective anymore. And I'm curious when you start talking about what are these old myths, like what are they ingraining in a collective when they say that this is always present, or that this is a part of the story, having a witch at the wedding.
yeah. Could you, are you just asking me to expand on that idea and be a bit clearer?
I'm just curious, in terms of how do you think that these old stories prepare us for moments like this, and like how are we in some ways going against the nature of these stories when we get so obsessed with being so safe and secure that we don't make space for a witch at the wedding, or we don't understand the nature of life and the nature of story, that there's always going to be somebody messing with you. There's always going to be that aspect of conflict. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. There's so many different ways in which you could illustrate it, but like in a kind of scientific level, perhaps we try so hard to shut out germs from our life nowadays. And yeah, if we don't allow in some germs and bacteria, then we're not going to have immune systems. So we've got to have a bit of let in a bit of the is it trickster? Is it something we don't want energy in there? That's perhaps like having your Loki or your dangerous element in Asgard. I experienced it with a friend who I was at a festival with last weekend, and he's someone who's chaotic, and a lot of the time I don't want to have this around. But then just got me reflecting about how you kind of need to accept that in your friendship groups, like you can't think I need everyone, I need to get on with everyone all the time. Otherwise, it's just not going to be fresh. You're going to get set in your ways. Um, I I'm undiagnosed, but I believe I have Asperger's syndrome. I used to work with I was a support worker for a lot of people with Asperger's, and I'm pretty sure. And so I watch myself for a lot of Aspergerian habits, and I notice that as I've got self-employed, I can decide a lot of how I live my life, how I spend my days, what kind of habits I get into, so on and stuff like that. And I notice myself getting so habitual and finding it really hard to get out of my own ways of doing things, or to harder to deal with the kinds of people who I used to have to encounter a lot when I had a job. Is this making sense? And then yeah, in mythology, so Loki and Asgard being a great example. So in Norse mythology, Loki is a giant. He's not one of the Aesir. He's not one of the gods of Asgard. Yet Odin kind of protects him and lets him live in Asgard, not only lets him, but makes sure that he is there. And, he causes absolute chaos for the gods. And it's predicted quite early on by the Norns, the people who Odin goes to for advice and for foresight. They say, he is going to be the end of you. He's going to lead a war. He's going to lead Ragnarok. He's going to get that going. And Odin still keeps him around. The phrase "the witch at the wedding." Tina, who works at Martin Shaw, just used that last week. So that's kind of fresh in my mind. In Sleeping Beauty, that all starts when a certain witch or fairy is invited to the wedding, and she's pretty pissed off about that. So she comes along, and that's where we end up with a pricking of the finger and Beauty going to sleep for all that time. You've got to invite in those chaotic elements. And yeah, it has gone so far the other way, where I see people now like writing online, please block me if you disagree with me on any of these subjects. And yeah, I don't agree with that at all. Do you?
Yeah, I so appreciate that, and I love that story that you just referenced, because I feel like that is a keystone story, that's a warning story that says, look, if you don't invite everyone to the table of communion, you'll create a curse that affects the collective.
Yeah.
And it's like, and unless you learn how to be with the collective, then yeah, you won't get to thrive as an individual. I love that you referenced that story. It's one of my favorites on that.
Great. Does anyone else have a question or comment at this point? Should I carry on? Okay. So yeah, last comment there. I'd say this is particularly pertinent in trickster times. So I think we've just covered that. But it's a phrase of Martin Shaw's that this is trickster times. The times are so chaotic, so far outside of anything the human race has experienced before, that it can only be a trickster time. So we cannot just look at stories and hope for them to show us the way. I think when I feel like it's difficult, but I feel like we have to be prepared to meet them. We have to be prepared to make quite a lot of effort ourselves, because the stories hold so much wisdom. But this is a completely different time to anything that's gone before. And that's how I'd phrase that. So it's a time to be creative with our mythology. Here's how I do it. And so this is my book, The Shattering Sea, book one of what will be a 5-book series cycle called the Orkney Cycle. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to show you how I have created this book, this series, look at all the different ingredients for that there. And focusing on my own work here, because obviously I can give you an inside perspective that I can't give you on other people's work, and then reference a few other people's work. And then hopefully having this kind of real opening up of what's going on behind the scenes in a piece of work like this might give you some ideas for how you might do something similar if you wanted to do this. So, how did this start? So, so here's a map of Scotland, and just off the top of tip of the mainland, you might spot a cluster of islands just off the northeast of the Scottish mainland. So this is Orkney. Looking a bit closer, I wanted to write something set in Orkney. I wanted to write something based on a story from Orkney called Asipattle and the Master Stirworm, or Asipattle and the Muckle Maester Stirworm, or as Martin Shaw calls it, Cinderbiter. Hands up if you know that story. Okay, we're new to that. All right. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of why this landscape excited me and what the story was that was set there that I decided to set something on. So just a few pictures of the lands there. It's mostly not that high rising, not many mountains, but very stormy, very jagged coastline. You get these stacks here. There's about 12 of them around the coast. This is a place called the Dwarfy Stane or Dwarfy Stone, which is this strange hollowed out chamber. No one quite knows what it is, why it's there. It's this huge megalithic rock that seems to have been deposited there by a glacier. And this is Skara Brae, which you may well have seen pictures of. Is a village. This is about as old as the pyramids. It's about 5,000 years old, which was abandoned. Was the sea, the beach was coming closer. It got basically covered over by sand and so on, and then was uncovered and found to be intact with furniture sitting on the shelves there. Everything just completely as it was 5,000 years ago. Incredible place. It's a place where the past is very, very present. You can really feel the past and go wandering around in the past. You've got 3,000-year-old tombs just sitting there in farmers' fields with no sign, no visitor centre or anything like that, because they're just everywhere, and you can wander in the darkness, climb in, and just be there in that darkness. It's incredible. Incredible standing stone circles, and this story. So let's just go through it quickly. There's a giant sea serpent terrorizing the north of Scotland. The king sends out armies and they get eaten by the serpent. The king goes to see a wizard. The wizard says the king must give 7 virgins to the serpent each week. And the king does this, and the attacks stop. And this works, but people are a bit annoyed, because their daughters and so on are getting given to this sea serpent. And then the wizard says if the princess is sacrificed, then the worm will leave. Her name gets called up to be one of the 7 virgins. And the king's like, oh, well, okay, no, I'm not doing this anymore. It was fine when it was other people's daughters, but not my daughter. So he says that anyone who destroys the worm will get his kingdom, his sword, and his daughter's hand in marriage, as you do. So we now shift the action to a remote farm where a family has 7 sons, and the 7th son, Asipattle, likes to lie by the fire, making up stories while his brothers work. They and his parents hate him, absolutely despise him, kicking as they walk past him. And Asipattle hears this, that, anyone who defeats the serpent, yada, 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 yada. And he says, I will destroy the serpent. Everyone thinks this is hilarious. Everyone ignores him. But he gets up at night, steals his father's horse, rides down to the shore, steals a pot of burning peat from an old woman, steals a boat, and he rows out to sea. And out comes the worm from the sea. The worm yawns, and Asipattle rows into its mouth and then goes running down its tongue, down this great dark cavern of its mouth, down its body, into its stomach. You can just imagine how lovely that was. And there he opens up the kind of little slit into the worm's liver and pours in the burning peat. Then he starts running out of there really, really fast, as fast as he can, and the worm shoots to the surface, roars, and Asipattle goes shooting out of its mouth, flies through the air, and lands, bam, on the beach. There's the king, there's the princess, and there they watch as the worm burns up. Out of its mouth come teeth which land in the sea, these sharp ones which become the Faroe Islands, these the molars, which were the incisors become the Faroe Islands, the molars become Orkney and the Shetlands Islands. And obviously Asipattle defeated the serpent, and Asipattle gets to marry the princess. They live happily ever after, and the burning body of the Stirworm is still out there. It's called Iceland. So, good story, entertaining story. I like it very much. I enjoyed telling it to kids. And I decided I wanted to do something based on this and throw in a few other ingredients. Because if you're going to be writing fiction, generally what you're doing, and I'm sure this applies to other works of art, excuse me. What you're doing is you're combining two unexpected things, two or three unexpected things, and that makes something new. And that's the really simple formula for how it works. One of the great books on creative writing is by Stephen King, and he talks about one of his early ideas. He took the idea of menstruation and telekinesis, and that's how he created Carrie, the girl who kind of gets her moon and then shoots lightning at people. Two things you never really would have thought to link together, but it creates something new. So I had this story which is about Orkney, and it looked at a few Orkney mythological creatures. We have here the Selkies, of course, the seal people, which you're probably familiar with, the Trowies, the little dancing people under the hill, and then this shadowy figure down to the bottom right, the Finn men or Finn folk, these strange creatures which are peculiar to Orkney and the neighbouring Shetland Islands. Not really much known about them. Shadowy sorcerer figures live on these vanishing islands. And it was by combining the Finn men, the idea of these people who lived on these mysterious vanishing islands, with the story of Asipattle and a few other elements, that I came up with something new. Looking at the history, because I wanted to set in the prehistory of Orkney, the important thing here is we look down to 950 BC. Hekla, a volcano in Iceland, erupted. The sky turned dark, the temperatures dropped, the crops failed. And after that, funnily, the tombs in Orkney were destroyed or backfilled. They started destroying their tombs, they started filling them up. So the sky went dark. People presumably in Orkney didn't know why. They must have wanted to blame people. Who did they blame? And then they started destroying their tombs, destroying their own culture. So all of these kind of went round and round and round in my mind. And I added in a twist from my favorite childhood book, The Deptford Histories, The Oaken Throne. And that's a kind of evil stoat there, I think. And an interest I have in ayahuasca shamanism, particularly Shipibo shamanism from the Amazon, and came up with the Shattering Sea. So almost at the end of the presentation here, bear with me, and then we're going to be handing over to you. So the way it worked for me in my story is that long ago the Finn folk and the clans shared the islands. And then the sky darkened, Hekla erupting in Iceland, the crops failed, there was a war for land, which the Finn folk lost. They were banished to one small island, where we have the vanishing islands of the Finn folk, and they were forbidden to leave it. And the island clans were united under one king who'd made a bit of a power grab using this opportunity. Magic was outlawed. It was believed the Spaes, the magicians, had caused the sky to darken. Communal tombs fell into disuse. People distrusted the Spaes who did their work in the communal tombs. Hundreds of years pass, and then Asipattle, our little hero, sees a Finn man performing a sacrifice on the beach. He sees a half-eaten orca, washes up on the beach. The great worm, I call it an Azawan, attacks. It kills everyone except him. Why didn't it kill him? And then he goes to see the king and see the princess about all this. And rather than having him win the hand of the princess, him and the princess, who's much tougher than him, they get together to defeat the serpent together. So that is combining all those different elements of the history, the story, the place, the prehistory, lots of time on the land, wandering around there, meditating in the tombs, getting a feel for the place, and this intent to offer something devotional to the traditions around that place that I love and to the land itself there that I have this great love for. So I'm just going to show you a couple of different examples of people who are working in the same kind of way now. First, Martin Shaw's book Cinderbiter, which is about this story, Asipattle. Pattle as it's like it's gone out of my head now, but basically it means the same thing, Cinderbiter and Asipattle. So he opens with this poem: the grey churn, the salted bruise, the green bridle, the seal-proud comb around Scotland's sculled coasts. Near it there is a farm, a resolute tump, The gull shrill wind beats like medicine for a gummed ear. The family bent sow low to the ground, praying to the seed gods. All Argus sliced clean with poverty's cleaver. The trance of fieldwork, claiming all up to the silvered line of the shore. All but one. And then this is an artist called Catherine Sutar, an artist I worked on in my Finn and the Fianna book, worked with on this book. And she created this beautiful piece of artwork for the story from the Finn McCool story of Dermot and Grania, the boar hunt. So it was this scene in which this woman's lost her husband, the sun and moon fell out of the sky, the earth reached up and pulled her heart out of her chest. She fell down and cried, wailing like all the banshees in the world gathered together. Catherine has a great devotion to these stories, a great love for these stories. So she created these works of art, which are way more than she'd really been commissioned to do money-wise for the book. But, you know, she had this great love for it. So this is a kind of creative mythology for her. And this is my friend Leah, who's been making these things for Instagram posts. She took this, makes digital art. This is a photograph that she took in Iceland of a waterfall, and then an illustration of the Cailleach, the Scottish and Irish goddess of winter, kind of imposed on top. And I just love that one. It's cool, isn't it? I can see one of you, Loki, you're smiling a lot. I'm glad you like that too. I love that one. And then finally, this is Beltane Fire Festival in Edinburgh. So this is a recreation of the traditions of Beltane, which they perform up the hill there, and Beltane Eve in Edinburgh, knowing that, you know, we don't really have our traditions anymore, so they're just kind of remaking them, just using their imaginations, using the story that they have, and creating something spectacular and wonderful, which is movement and ritual and performance all at once. So creative mythology can be literature, it could be poetry, it could be drawing, it could be digital art, it could be movement, it could be ceremony, ritual, it can be whatever else you might want it to be. For me, so long as it's done with this sacred devotional intent. And so I've got a few stories here which I'm going to offer to you if you don't have one which springs to mind. But what we're going to be doing now is I'm going to stop sharing the screen, stop talking for a bit, and we're going to hear from you. So I want to hear a bit about your thoughts on what I've been talking about on creative mythology, anything that's come bubbling up while I've been talking there. And then I'm going to offer you some time to make some creative offerings to some stories that you love, or if you can't think of a story, then some stories that I've brought along. So stop sharing there. Phew, that was a lot more talking than I've done in one go for a while. Thank you for listening to me. I hope it was useful. So could we go around now? And yeah, someone's raising their hands. Joy.
The thing that struck me immediately was the image of filling in the gaps, because as a student of Jewish tradition and Jewish teaching, it's called midrash, and a lot of what we know about Jewish tradition supposedly is often midrash. It's stories that fill in those spaces that are so concise. You know, how did this happen and how did this happen? And that's precisely what filling the gaps is. And I just really was struck by that. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. So go around, Tanya. Could you just share any thoughts you have on all this?
I think what was going through my mind is how very disconnected I am from all of it. I'm coming from a different culture. I'm originally from Europe, and trying to make it here, everything new was better, and striving to achieve more, and in the process, forgetting the roots. So all of this is bringing up a lot of emotions and a lot of, and a reminder that we are all coming from somewhere, and that is, because the more I'm striving for something, the emptier I feel. So this is bringing back the idea that this is possibly why.
Fantastic, thank you. And can you tell me, is there particular traditions or stories that you are really drawn to from your homeland or elsewhere that you feel you might want to work with in this way?
Um, Gosh, I've been in the United States for over 20 years. So I think it's more about traditions. Yeah, I will have to spend a little bit more time. It's super embarrassing and sad, but it's more of folk stories. I'm originally from Slovenia, former Yugoslavia, and we do have rich background. Even though Slovenia is just barely over 2 million people, 7 regions have very distinct stories and backgrounds, and it's super sad that I have let it go so far. But I will have to refresh my mind myself about them. Yeah.
Sure. Oh, someone's in the waiting room. Yeah, so no expectations here, of course, of knowledge or connection to any particular tradition. I meant to ask you guys earlier, but I went launched straight into the presentation, but just a bit about what you feel connected to. So that's great to know. Thank you. And could I just go back and ask that to Joy as well, or what do you feel particularly connected to or curious about?
Well, I was thinking about the connection between this creative mythology and tradition, and the idea of the tradition not being the ashes, but the embers. And I'm trying to think about how tradition connects with the creative mythology. I don't know if you could just expand on that slightly.
Yeah, just to say again, so the way I see it is that any tradition was always alive and was always being renewed in response to the times, in response to the world. So we're just doing the same thing. We're just continuing to do that, but with a bit more emphasis on the creative side of tradition if we're working with a tradition where there just isn't that much left. So we just have to be a bit more creative. Okay, thank you. How about you? Is it Loki? Loki?
Yes, it's okay. Well, I left the mainland 30 years ago, and I was so hungry for roots. And my parents were different religions. And so the stories, like my Irish grandmother, my father would make fun of her stories. My Jewish grandmother refused to share story because we were raised Catholic. And so I was completely disconnected to, yeah, my mother didn't carry any of her mother's stories. And so I felt really lost and empty when I came to Hawaii. And here in Hawaii, my late husband was very deeply connected to free history. And he was very enraged by what was being lost. And then what was coming in was an Americanized version, sanitized. And now even Disney has taken, parts of it, and how sad that is. But what happened here was a coming alive of the culture again in 2013, when there was a protecting of the mountain from a giant telescope. It's still going on, but this brought together all the young people with the elders. And so this re-education started happening, and this respect for the culture. And I often think my late husband would be so happy today to have seen this regeneration. The kids were in school and in their immersion school, and then created these ceremonies with the elders. The elders brought the ancient ceremonies to life. And so many more came together and started living their daily practices of spirituality and the sacredness that is the most important part. And really that's what was being lost and is being regained here in Hawaii. And the stories here really there were stories here that were given to me, and it's fascinating because I have been told by some elders that I've been here before in other lifetimes, and there's just such a draw and connection to me to the stories here and the life here. And but I want to explore now that I'm older, I want to go explore my family's roots and all the the traditions and the stories there, to bring them alive again for future generations.
Okay, great. Thank you. So are you telling stories from Hawaii?
Telling some stories, like the Maui
Okay.
stories is a big,
Yeah.
he's the trickster here in Hawaii, and had 7 great feats of giving the humans things like fire and longer days. And yeah, those stories are very, as I live here, the longer I live here, each word has such significance in the culture that it's carrying such a knowledge. And so I just love it. I love it.
Okay. Well, that's great. Oh, I'd love to go there sometime. And
Let me know.
will do. Fairy Ann?
Yeah, this is really, really rich. One of the things that is prescient on my mind is I just went to a music festival in Grass Valley called World Fest. And the main reason I went is because I wanted to see Lila June live. I don't know if anybody knows who she is, but she's indigenous and European descent, and she's an incredible, badass female academic, but rapper, and she's really great at illuminating her story that like in her indigenous roots, but then like I had this other side of me that I was denying, and really poetically and poignantly goes through the separation of the European peoples from their, so what you're talking about, right, that you don't know your traditions, right, there's this incredible grief that our separation from the land and from the earth and from being connected was thousands of years before any of the Europeans came to the Americas. So that trauma just got, introduced to the lands here. And then my ancestors are Bavarian and from Slovakia. And so they left before there was a German state or before there was a Czechoslovakia state. And like listening to you, Tanya, like it's really sad. Like I grew up in this country, so it is like in some ways there's like a storyless culture, kind of like what Leah was saying before, is like these little bubbles that people are in, I'm this, I'm that, and just like, the mythology. And there's this one story from Germany that I love to tell that like is just mind-blowing to me, and I would really like to do more research about it. It's about 3 butterflies and they're different colors, and it's raining and they go to the flowers for shelter, and the red butterfly gets sheltered by the red tulip, but the red tulip doesn't want to shelter the yellow and white butterfly. And the red butterfly is like, I don't want to go anywhere, my friends aren't welcome. And this goes through a white flower and a yellow flower. And in the end, all the clovers form a canopy, and the butterflies crawl underneath it and are protected. And I was like, it just struck me so hard. Like, this is a German folktale based on what happened in German history. Like, what are the roots of this folktale? How not present was that story in people's minds, when in the 30s and the 40s. So it's definitely a story that I want to work on. And I think And the other thing that came to mind, Tanya, when you were speaking, is there's this incredible Chinese writer. I can't remember her name, but she writes similar things to what you write, Daniel, with these mythological stories. But her personal story is that she was adopted from China, and she grew up in upstate New York, and she refused anything Chinese. Her mother was always trying to give her stuff that was Chinese, and just no, 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 no. And like, I'm American, right? She wanted to fit in. And there were these beautiful folktale books from China her mother had given her with all these illustrations, and she never read them. But when she went to Italy on a student exchange, people started asking her about her Chinese ancestry, and she's like, oh my God, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. And when she went back and found these folktale books, which were the only thing she had read from that her mother was trying to give her, and then she was become this incredible writer for young adult and children's literature, where that thing of taking these folk tales and turning them into these like magical novels. I can't remember her name, it'll come to me at some point. So Tanya, there's like, when it's just that unearthing process is just, I don't know, I feel like we're all kind of doing that in our own way. It's like remembering, or Lila June was talking about over the weekend, something came up from the audience, like rehumaning. It's like we're all rehumaning. What does it mean to be a human again? And part of that is going back to like, where do we come from? So as far as the story, I would love to do research and find out more about the roots of this particular German folktale that seems quite stunning based on the German history.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if this is Carl Hyatt. You there?
Yes, I hope so.
Yes.
Up.
Great.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, I just love this talk. And Leah, I love all your work and all your workshops. Just delicious stuff. I'm primarily a photographer, but even in college, I wanted to be a writer. And now later in life, having traveled a lot and photographed a lot, I'm starting to write, and I've had some things published. I've been going to Peru for more than 20 years and photographing mostly up in the mountains with the indigenous shamans. And after 20 years of photographing up there, rather unconsciously, because I was really there to study with the shamans, I have this huge body of photography of people and places that are vanishing. And eventually I'm going to have to write about that. I've also spent a lot of time in Scotland, and particularly in Iona. Madly in love with Scotland. And Denmark. So I live on the coast of New England, so it's rocks for me. Rocks in Scotland, rocks in Denmark, rocks in Peru. Yeah, so that's the 1 minute synopsis.
Thank you. And do you feel that you are drawn to the idea of taking particular stories and expanding them in a more creative way?
You know, I was just talking to a shaman the other day who was suggesting that. So that's 2 suggestions in 24 hours. I hadn't really thought about that. I was thinking about it a bit more literally, but yeah. And I'm a huge fan of Martin Shaw too. So I was thrilled to see your workshop come up.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Shauna.
Hi, glad to be here. I am driving right now, and I'm so sorry, but I had bad reception, so I've only just come in, so I'm not exactly sure the question.
Okay. So I was asking you if there are particular mythological traditions you connect with and how you feel about this idea of creative mythology that I've talked about.
Right. Well, yes, I am very interested in creative stories and mythology. And I've studied with a few folks that have been mentioned today. I think what I really would like to do is I grew up I'm on an island in Canada, and I grew up in First Nations culture. My grandfather was First Nations, although I look very white. So I got to grow up in that culture. And when I lost a piece of the land a few years ago, I was in such grief over the land that I actually went back to my European culture, which one book that I did get into, I saw that you put up a book about the Orkneys. I'll have to re-watch the first part of this talk. But I went back to Scotland and to Ireland to look at the feel and walk the land that my ancestors were from, and mostly to find the women's ceremonies around grief. So I got to study, and mostly in Finland, actually study with some women that still call themselves Keening women. And so that's where I guess I'm tying my creativity into.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Shauna. And Leah, is there anything you wanted to share?
You know, yeah, I have an absolute, complete, utter absence of connection to my own roots, which has been just, you know, a great irony in terms of my livelihood of work. And, but I would say that from the very beginning, the Greek myths always felt like home. And beyond that, creation stories, like absolutely obsessed with creation stories of all kinds. And those are the kinds of stories that find me now and come through me and are always asking to come through me. And so it's put me kind of into that internal aspect or the eternal aspect of myths. You know, I had this experience where I was in Ecuador a few months ago, and I was speaking to this fellow, and he was telling me that, you know, they have this issue where, you know, because the colonization, now everyone speaks Spanish, and they're no longer, the youngers aren't speaking the indigenous language of the elders anymore. And that his grandmother, nobody speaks her language anymore, and that she's going to die soon. And I was like, well, is there a cultural preservation? Are people like collecting her stories? I mean, these are like your creation stories are going. And he's like, nobody's collecting them. And I was just like, I got like, it was like somebody like hit me in the chest with this anvil, because I was just like, oh, to like be so close and so far away at the same moment of it. And I felt, wow, I was like, those stories are going to be lost. And then I had this like snap of what a bastardized, westernized, disconnected way of thinking that is. Because the bones of that woman will go back to the earth, and those stories came from this earth. And so the fact that like I'm really in this place of wondering if a story can be lost, or if it's that our listening is lost. And that if we can keep coming back to this listening, deep listening, that all the stories are there, but it's a matter of like, can we speak the language of our land? And can we hear it, even if we're not from it, you know? So those are the wanderings that you inspired. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to respond to that before we get to you, Joy, that does raise this question of, when I'm talking about all this creative mythology, these offerings coming from various people, where are they coming from? Is it us making stuff up, or are we being given stuff? And I think just speaking as a novelist, like pretty much every novelist I've ever spoken to, no matter what their beliefs or whatever, they say they don't feel like they're making stuff up. A character, they can just kind of feel them there. and it's like they're standing next to them in the dark, and you can sense them really strongly, but you can't see them, and it's just a case of gradually trying to figure out what's there and who they are. It's not making it up, and it's I don't know if how much of what's happening for me is that what always happens when I write, or if there is something else to it, if the land is in some way speaking to me. I believe that it feels like that to me. It feels like whatever happens to make people come up with, arrive at stories in the first place, that in some way is what's happening for me. I can't speak for anyone else, but yeah, that's raised that topic, and it's a really special feeling when you feel that is happening. It can feel kind of presumptuous. It can feel kind of, I don't know, it can feel a bit grandiose, but I don't know. I like being a bit grandiose sometimes.
Yeah, but I have to say, like, the whole illusion, like, I wish you could actually see, like, because when you see someone writing, they look all alone. And we have this story like, oh, you gotta go be alone to be right. And I'm like, oh, they're not alone. They're surrounded. If we could have an illustration of what's really happening. But yeah.
Yeah. Joy.
I was wondering, when I think about doing this, it seems so often I encounter voices and teachers and people saying that it's not legitimate to encounter myths that you can't, like, by some bloodline connect to. And it's like, okay, do my bloodlines, are they closely enough connected to Germany that I can do a German story? Or, nobody knows what the Celtic stories are anymore. Or I'm just wondering what to do with that, because to me, I feel like when you start delving into myth creatively, you can get accused of cultural appropriation. And I wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about next. So I am cultural appropriation. It's like we need to talk about it here. At the same time, it's this huge other topic which I don't want to get bogged down in too much. And I'm sure you guys are talking about in other sessions, but it's relevant. So a couple of things I want to say to that here. One, that I feel that whatever kind of, if you have come to any kinds of conclusions, and I think it should always be an ongoing process of inquiry, but if you have come to any kind of conclusions about whether you feel okay with telling the stories of a particular tradition or of telling particular stories within a tradition, the same things apply to me to what we're doing here. If it's doing a bit more expansion and so on, it's that bit more edgy. You have to be that bit more conscious. You really have to be inquiring with yourself how you feel about this. When I say you feel, because to take the example of Scottish stories, I can talk about that with some small measure of authority. In Scotland, at least, if you're interested in telling Scottish stories, there is no Grand High Scotsman who can give you ultimate authority to tell or say you can't tell a story. No one outside of yourself is ever going to be able to say for you that's not okay or that is okay. It might be different in different traditions. I don't know. There may be an elder, whatever it might be. In Scotland, we are adept at selling our culture. We are adept at prostituting our culture and making absolute crap out of it. And we make a lot of money out of that. And everyone's okay with it, from, Loch Ness Monster postcards to sexy, nearly naked men kilt calendars. It's everywhere in Scotland. And, if you like all that stuff, fine. But I, personally feel if we're okay with all that, how can we not be okay with people lovingly and respectfully engaging with our culture, doing their work, doing their research, and then from this loving, respectful place, telling a story and making their own contribution, making their own tending of that fire? I'm certainly okay with that as someone who carries Scottish stories and has popularized them for many people. I'm not just okay with it, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I want you to do it. So if you have any desire to do work with Scottish stories, and if you take my opinion into account at all, please, please, please do. Is that helpful at all?
Yes, it's very helpful. I think it's harder, like for those of us here where things are mixed up, and this teacher Stephen Jenkinson talks about us as an orphan people because we haven't brought these stories with us. And I guess I feel like what I've gotten from you is a personal affirmation that I shouldn't worry about the stories I write as long as I am doing them with great care and respect. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, that's in the area of what I think we're always going to have to keep an eye open and check in with ourselves, how we feel about what we're doing, and check in with other people as well. Like, none of this stuff exists in isolation. If you get up and tell one of your stories to a group of people, it's not like you're just telling the story and then you're going to dash out into your car and leave. Probably you can say, oh, and you know, I've had my doubts about whether or not I should be doing this. You might disagree with me. I would love to hear your opinion afterwards. Let's have a discussion. Stuff like this can go on. Let's just talk to each other. Another thing I want to say is that, like, if we compare it to evolution, like, say you want to tell the story of the coming of Lu from Irish mythology, say, and you want to give him a robot horse for whatever reason, you might do that, and that might work well for you. It might not. But it's like a genetic mutation in an animal. One animal somewhere gets some strange little genetic mutation. If it doesn't work, it's going to disappear. If it does work, it's going to catch on, and more animals are going to reproduce, and more animals are going to have that mutation. And so evolution happens, but it's going to take 10,000 years, or however long evolution takes. So your one telling of a story or a recreation of story is just one amongst the sea of thousands and thousands and thousands of other people who are telling that story. And if there's nothing really in it, it's going to disappear. Or if it's just for you, it's going to disappear. And if there is something in it that catches on and it changes the landscape of the story, and somehow it sounds like that needed to happen. It was an adaptation for the times. So I think it's worth thinking about things within that larger context. Yes, please, Carl.
Yeah, a couple of things. In my experience in Peru, they don't really hold, or at least my teachers, they hold that cultural appropriation very lightly. And the way I think about it is it's a bit like whatever that Supreme Court justice said about pornography. I know it when I see it. I certainly see people do things, people from outside of Peru who come to Peru do things that make my skin crawl. But for my teachers, they are very open. And when you ask them something like this, they will say, these ceremonies are not my ceremonies. These ceremonies are Pachamama ceremonies. So why wouldn't I share them with you? Of course, I want you to be more connected to Pachamama. I mean, obviously, we all need to be. So it's a little different in North America. I would say the atmosphere is a little different. But in South America, you show up with an open heart and what do you want to know? The other thing I would say is, and again, the land that you're on or the land that you're visiting sometimes gives dreams to you. I mean, these borders I hold these borders very lightly. We're human beings on a planet that loves us. So it's open. As far as I'm concerned, it's open. I was in a very special village high up in the Andes 10 or 15 years ago. And I had been there before, and it's a home to ancient teachings, pre-Inca teachings. And the evangelicals had had a huge impact on this little village since I had been there before. And I was quite upset about this. And the local shamans were keeping their head down because, of course, it's a small village. And when the wind blows one particular way, everybody, you know, if you're not, you know, you keep your head down. So my shaman friend, I was expressing my outrage and my upset. And he said, Carl, don't worry about it. All these teachings came from the land, and they will come back from the land. And one last teaching, the tradition down there is that a powerful shamaness or powerful shaman, their wisdom, their power, their medicine goes back to the mountains. You know, in another landscape would, I don't know, would be going back to the jungle, but up there it's all big mountains. And that wisdom and that power is accessible for the person to whom it's accessible to. It doesn't go away, just like the stories. It's Pachamama holds it. So this phrase is just coming to me. I feel at home on the planet. My relationship is with the planet. And I'm certainly careful about certain cultural transgressions. But all of these cultures were created. All of these cultures were created, and the powerful ones were created by people who were deeply in touch with the Mother Earth and the elements. So, yeah. So anyway, that's my take.
Yeah, really liked what you said there, Carl. Thank you very much. Really couldn't agree more. Loke.
I'm actually in an allyship group with Native American women, both from Canada and the United States, and white women. And with this education of their point of view is, it's about making money on it. So when it's, especially when people like say do a painting and they use symbology in there and they claim that they are native and they're not at all. And they're making money off of it. When someone is making money off of it and then not recognizing the source of these symbologies, that's when they feel, in this group, they feel that it's cultural appropriation. And they don't discourage people from utilizing these symbologies if they came to you in a dream or you know, a vision, and you have them in your painting, but claiming that you are Native American and you're not. That's where the line gets drawn. So, and there's some in between gray areas that are a little tricky, and how they see it, in this group, they see it as that you should be giving something back to the people and the earth. And that's what's really important to them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so coming back to this idea of giving and taking, so yeah, this is one of the reasons emphasizing so much the intent of giving with what we do. And of course, there are lots of considerations coming in, such as financial and honesty and so on. Yeah, all really worth considering. I think that's as far as we should go on the appropriation topic just now. I feel like we're pretty much on the same wavelength, and we covered the main areas here. And so what I think we want to do is just reading what you put there, Carl. So yeah, what we're gonna, I think it's about time to just take a little break and we can do what we need to do and then come back together, and then we're going to move into our main activity. So I'll suggest that we take 10 minutes. While you're making your cup of tea or whatever it is, have a little think and see what story is presenting itself to you, if there is a story, because I'm going to ask you when we come back to share a story which you and your little group of three are going to respond to, and then person B is going to share a story and everyone's going to respond to it. Person C in your group is going to share a story, everyone's going to respond to it. So have that, draw that out, hold it lightly, because we're going to be doing something playful here. And yeah, I also just want to draw attention before we take our break back to this idea of dreaming and of being dreamt, that these stories are coming from Pachamama, from the island of Sandy and Orkney, coming from Hawaii or wherever it is we might sit. And I appreciate that level being brought to it, because it's, yes, when I'm so used to going out and talking to people about my books, it's not the level I can always talk on, because you can talk about different things with different audiences, and it's nice to talk about that because I feel this tenderness just arising in my heart as we speak about the stories on this level, because that's what it is to me. It is a communion with the elements, with the lands and other things, and I really appreciate you guys bringing up that level of it and talking to that level of it. It's such a special thing to engage oneself with. Okay, so we'll come back just after 25 past and get to work. Is that all right, everyone? Okay, I will see you then. Really going to be listening. Not going to be listening to me, and instead we're going to be listening to each other. So we're just going to do a little exercise to get ourselves warmed up. Does everybody have a story in mind? Okay, I think I saw a small nod there, Joy. Didn't see a shaking of the head. All right, I don't know, sure, maybe. And Shauna, do you have a story?
I don't really have a story.
Okay, Grant. I'm going to give you one for our main exercise then. But for now, you'll pick up as we go along, because I'm sure you'll know a story which we can do this with. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go around and we're all going to take 1 minute to tell a story. You're going to try and tell a story in 1 minute. You're going to fail, perhaps spectacularly, and that's the idea. So let go of any ideas about succeeding or being good, because you're just not going to be good. You've got 1 minute. It's going to be ridiculous. And that's what we're going to do just to get our juices flowing. So Shauna is going to try her work. Fair enough. So I will get things going. Does anyone want to give me a story which I have a chance of knowing? It could be a film, could be anything which I'll have a chance of knowing, and I'll try and do it in 1 minute.
Little Red Riding Hood.
Red Riding. God, I don't really know that one that well. It's been so long. Give me a different one. I'm fuzzy on that one.
Jack and the Beanstalk.
Jack and the Beanstalk. Oh God, you're getting me in the stories I don't know very well. I ignore these ones. Okay, give me another try, or I'm going to give one for myself.
Let's see.
I'm afraid to strike out. Somebody else go to bed.
Okay, I'm going to try the Fellowship of the Ring. Okay.
What?
Okay, so let's get going. Go. So there was once this guy who made a ring, and he made loads of rings, and gave them out to a bunch of people who were powerful people, and he thought that they were getting loads of power, but they weren't really, because they're all giving power to him. So he became the really powerful person and became the Dark Lord who took over the whole world. But then he went and lost his ring, and he got his hand chopped off, and then it got lost, but it was picked up by this guy who kept it for himself, and it kind of bewitched him, and he went all mad, and he went from being Smeagol to Gollum, and he went and hid up in these mountains. But then this hobbit came along, who was a bit like him, but wasn't mad, and he took it. And then years later, the guy Sauron, who had the ring originally, kind of found out that where the ring might belong to someone called Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo Baggins' friend, who was a wizard, came along, and he went along and said, you need to take that ring, and you need to take it to this mountain where it was made, and it'll be destroyed. So he went, did that, and he went with a bunch of mates, and he met this ranger bloke, and eventually got some help from some elves, went down under some mountains, and someone got killed, and it was really bad. And then eventually they went through some elven forest, and then they got to this river, they went down the river, and there's this big battle, and the guy with the ring decided he needed to do it alone because everyone was getting messed up with the ring, so he went off on his own, and that's the end of the story, the Fellowship of the Ring. Did it a second to go. All right. Who's next? I think Tanya is next. So you ready to go?
I can neither speak there fast. Okay, I need
1, 2, 3, go.
Okay, so there was this little girl, and she wanted to go visit her grandmother because grandmother was sick. So she at home grabbed a nice little basket, and her mother filled it up with food and drinks. And the little girl went on her way and walked through the forest. She was dressed in this cute little red hood, and that's why she was called the Little Red Riding, with something like that. And she was going through the woods, and then she met Wolf, and Wolf was asking her where she's going, and she told him, and then Wolf went his way and she went her way. And then when she got to grandmother's home, then she approached her grandmother and she asked her, grandmother, why are your eyes so big? And then she asked her, grandmother,
Okay.
oh my God.
Good effort, good effort, good effort. Okay. And Fairy-Ann, you ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Once there were these 3 butterflies, and they lived together, and they loved each other, and they're best of friends. You saw one, you saw the other 2, the red, the yellow, and the white one. And one day they were out flying around, and it was raining, and butterflies can't fly when it's raining, so they had to go hide it. And so they saw a big red tulip, and the red butterfly flew up to the red tulip and said, please, can you bend your stem and make an umbrella and let us in? And when the red butterfly, saw the red butterfly, it felt like it saw a little baby of its own, and it bent its stem to let the little red butterfly in. But when the yellow and the white one came, it said, oh, no, they're different, they can't come in. And the red butterfly said, I don't want to go anywhere where my friends are not welcome. Well, the white butterfly saw a lily, and the same thing happened. And the yellow butterfly saw a yellow daisy, and the same thing happened, until finally they heard the little voices of the clovers down in the grass saying, please, we can shelter you. And they did. They made a little canopy, and the butterflies crawled in, and the sun came out and dried up that spot.
Is that just over the finish line? Well done. Very good effort. All right. Joy, you ready to have a go? Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Once upon a time, there was a boy who lived in a desert on a distant planet, and he was really bored. And he met 2 robots, and they had a story about a recording of a woman who needed help from somebody, Obi-Wan. So he went and he found Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan told him he had to go deal with fighting the Emperor. And he learned how to be really, really strong with something called the Force. And he went to save everybody by destroying this planet. And meanwhile, his teacher, Obi-Wan, had died, but he heard him in his head, because it wasn't a planet, it was a Death Star. And he went really, really fast, and he just listened, and he didn't aim his gun. He just let his gun go with the force, and it went in the right place and blew up the planet and saved the people.
Wow. Star Wars in 1 minute. That's an achievement. Well done. Yay. Loki, you ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
There once was a robot named Wally who was the last robot left on planet Earth that was cleaning up all the garbage while all the people were off on a ship floating around in the universe, and waiting for this moment when the plant was going to be found, that real life be found. When a ship arrived and a more modern robot comes out and finds a plant that he had found in a shoe and seizes the plant and brings it back to the ship. And after much difficulty, the captain of the ship finally gets a hold of the ship after the computer had taken over, and he takes it back, and they go back to Earth, and there's only this one plant that's still alive, but they decide to clean up the planet together.
Almost. Very good. I was trying to listen and not listen there because I've been meaning to watch that film for ages, and I was like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
I watch it all the time.
What film is that?
Wally!
Oh, Wally.
Okay. Shauna, are you able to do this? Okay.
Yes.
Leah, you up? Shauna.
Okay.
Okay, ready, Shauna? Shall I hit start?
Sure.
Okay, there we go.
Once upon a time, far away, there was a bear clan that great hunters would go out and they would track the bears, and with great ceremony, colorful fire dances and riveting ancestral incarnations, and they would track the bear into the cave, and they would make a great fire outside of the cave, and they would dance over the fire. They would kill the bear, and they would carry the bear as a god back to the clan, to the village. And in the village, the people would celebrate, and they would have a young girl that would marry the bear in the village ceremony. The bear head would be taken and sat at the king's place, and they would have the ceremony with all the people in the village.
I was just getting into that, but the minute's over. What story is that?
It's a Finnish, story from Finland.
Okay.
My
That
grandmother
sounds
used to
great.
tell me.
Intriguing. Thank you. And Leah, are you going to have a go?
Oh, sure. This sounds just horrible enough to try to do it and have fun. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a girl, and she was told that she could get to access to the very inner center of the universe, and so she took on this great challenge, and she went over the mountains and through the valleys and crossed all the monkeys and all the things, and she was just about to hit the dragon when she missed, and the dragon decided not to kill her because he liked her. He had a big crush on her. He had a really big crush on her. And he asked her to kiss her, and she was so offended that he just about melted and died and broke his heart. And so he rather than curse her, he gave her a potion to help her get through the whole castle. So she gets to the castle and she goes all the way through, and she conquers the whole thing, and she actually is about to get to the very axis, the center of the universe. But all of a sudden she's denied because she has denied love, like the true kiss of love. And she is so mad that she goes into a deep sleep. And when she goes in that deep sleep, and all of a sudden she starts dreaming about the dragon, she realizes what she missed. And then all of a sudden she takes the kiss and she transforms her, and then she gets love, and she gets to get through the universe, the kingdom, and that's it. Seconds.
All the time, start another one.
That's kind of fun.
What story?
What was that?
It's a story that I wrote called Dragon Love. Usually takes about 45 minutes to tell.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed that. Okay, thanks everyone for doing that. I think it's great for just loosening us up and getting us. I use this personally when I just what I need to practice or I want to start telling a story, but I've just got whatever it is in your head that stops you from doing that and keeps your jaw closed. Because as soon as you start doing this, you're thinking about the timer and getting to the end rather than the story, and it becomes a game. You forget all the story loses its weightiness. And so the way I like to do it is to do it, if do 1 minute, then instantly reset my timer and do it in 2 minutes, instantly reset, do it in 3 minutes, instantly reset, do it in 4 minutes. By that time you're really sick of it. Sometimes do 5 as well, and by that time you're just flowing, you're telling the story and you've got over that thing. So I'd really recommend that as an exercise if you find yourself in that position, which I think all storytellers find themselves in, where you just can't get your mouth open. Anyway, so I think it was Shauna said you didn't have any story in mind. So I've just written down, I'm just going to put them in the chat here, some really short story summaries. 2 Scottish stories and 1 pretty much universal story, Stone Soup, that you seem to get from everywhere, which you can just read out the bones of, have a glance through them, see if you like any of them, and then just read out the bones of that. They're really simple. And then that can be a story that you offer, story that you work with in the group. So I'm just, hang on. Hang on 1 moment. Okay, it's not letting me type that. Maybe it's too long. Try something a bit shorter. There we are. There's Fox and Dog. These are the ones I use a lot in my beginners courses. Nice simple stories. Everyone seems to like. Okay, so they're there if you want to use them, or if anyone wants to use them, and feel free to carry them away with you. But what we wanted to do is to now go into groups. I had 3s in mind, but maybe a 3 and 2, unless Leah wants to group. I was planning to just kind of dot in there with you and see what's going on. Or it could be a 3 and a 2. And then what I suggest is that one of you shares your story. We've got a bit, excuse me, because there's a small number of us, the sharing at the end isn't going to take as long as it would do if there was like 23 of us. So we can afford to take our time over this. So I would suggest, it's a bit long maybe. I think if everyone just shares their story in like up to 5 minutes, so we're keeping it moving. The idea is not to do an amazing storytelling, but you don't have to do it in the barest bones format. So you've got like 5 minutes, maybe max, to tell your story. And then after 15 minutes, no, we'll call it 10 actually, keep it, I think we should do things, maybe calling it 10 to respond to that. So the idea is that person A is going to share their story. Everyone, including person A, is going to respond to that and do a bit of writing, do a bit of poetry, get up and move, do some sketching, do some digital art if you do that. It's whatever you like, whatever creative response comes to mind, make a ritual, anything you want. But try to do at least one of the 3 times we'll do this, where you're going a bit outside your comfort zone and doing something you would never normally do. I hate drawing, for example, and terrible at it. So that's what I would do. Is that making sense?
Wait,
Okay.
so we are telling our own story, something that we have written, or I'm a little bit confused.
Right, so you're going to share a story which you find, a traditional story ideally, which you find inspiring, that you would like to do some work with, and you're going to offer it to the group, and then everyone in the group is going to do some kind of creative response to that. So you might tell the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. So one person's then going to write a poem based on Beanstalk, another person might do some artwork based on Jack and the Beanstalk, but we're all going to have a bit of time devoted to that story before we move on, and someone else is going to offer a story, and we'll do it with that story. Is that clear? Okay. So So, could I just address that later? I think there's maybe even a mix up in timings. I thought we had 3 hours.
Usually we do 2 hours.
Oh my God. I thought it said three. I had 3 hours in mind.
Well, I mean,
Right.
I'm sure that people will be delighted to receive what you have to give.
Yeah. Do people need to leave a particular time?
I'll need to leave before 3. I have to check with the person I'm going to see to work for. So
Okay. Three being, how long is that from now? Like 45 minutes or an hour?
I actually meant I need to leave in less than 3 hours total. So I need to
Right.
leave like in 40 minutes. So, but I will stay as long as I can.
Okay. Um, well, let's not push things too far. So maybe if we could do like respond to two stories, so there's not you're not just doing one, and we're going a bit over time and not too much over time, and hopefully that's okay with everyone. So does that work? Right. Um, Leah, could you do some dividing up into breakout rooms then, please?
I did. I created them. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, that was our first story, right? And then we're going to share the drawing or whatever we did all together.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about how to manage the time constraints, given that, I'd planned for 3 hours and we got 2 hours. I think because we want to have time for people to share and then go around and get reflection just to do this one round. And then, people can, in your own time, what we're doing now, you can go and do other bits of work like this. But I don't want to push on people's time. Yeah. Someone called Joy in the waiting room. Gonna. Beautiful bird noises. I'm gonna assume that's you, Loki.
Oh, that's me. Yes.
Yeah. I had that when I lived in Thailand. People were always like, "What is that?" The incredible birds of paradise.
I wanted to apologize. I have found out I want to thank you so much. This has been so amazing. And thank you, everybody.
Oh, sorry, I missed the first part of that, Joy. Oh, is that you saying goodbye? You need to go now.
Saying goodbye. It turns out I really can't stay over, and I'm sorry. I hope you'll be able to come back again. Take care. Bye-bye.
Joy, I'll
Thank you,
send you
Joy.
my poem.
Oh, okay, please
Or
do.
I'm going to share it, so if it's recorded, you can watch it.
Oh, great. I will.
Okay, right. So I think we're just going to do this one round, just being considering time constraints and the fact that we expect 2 hours, around 3 hours. We'll have time to share and then have a little chat and get a closing something from everyone. So we'll just do this one round, and if this feels like something to carry on with, you know what you're doing, and you can carry on doing more of this in your own time. So we're going to go around and we're just going to hear or see or experience something from everyone. So Tanya, would you be up for getting us started?
Yeah, so we just share what we got out of the story or what we came up with, or
Yeah, anything and either. If you've written an entire book, then share the first chapter. Maybe if you've got a sketch, show us the sketch, and whatever you got.
no, I just so Loket told us a story of Maui and how the fire was brought from the underground to the up. And what really stayed with me at the very end was when she was telling us that how the trees actually now carry the fire for us. So this is my.
Nice.
So it's a little forest, and how then Maui brought back 2 sticks with which they were making fire in the villages. So this is, and then also my interpretation went into, the heart of the tree as a fire, but then also in the fall, it turns the leaves turn the same colors as the fire is, like reds and oranges and browns. So this is fine.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think you got a satisfied storyteller there. And I love that we're so used to seeing fire in trees as this really awful thing, because it is in terms of forest fires, but then seeing it as this beautiful thing is wonderful.
It's also really interesting because my family, my brother and his in-laws had to evacuate right now because the fire is really close to their home. So it was just such a huge coincidence to be receiving this story, and Loki did not know that beforehand. So.
Okay. And yeah, I mean that's a huge thing for the US right now, isn't it? The forest fires. We don't see anything like that here. Yeah. Thank you very much. How about you, Ferianne?
All right. I can't see, guys. Where'd you go? There you are. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. Going to the store to buy some wisdom. Before, I can't read my own writing. I'm going to the store to buy some wisdom before imbibing lots of rum, rum, rum. The wisdom sounds dumb, but my desperation has me numb. So I succumb and bring in the chickens. Clickety clack, cock-a-doodle-doo. Clickety clack, cock-a-doodle-doo. So I went back to the wisdom store before I embarked on a life of gore. With blood on the floor, a mistake was made for sure. The wisdom sounds dumb, but my desperation has me numb. So I succumb and bring in the pig. Clickety clock. Clickety clock. Back to the wisdom store I run. These solutions are no fun. Wondering if I should bring my gun, because this is getting me beyond done. As far as I got. That was in response. I'm sure you all know that story. She told the story of the, I forget what it's called. Too much noise.
That was amazing. I love seeing the reactions of the people behind you as well. And I love that you do that out there.
I forget I'm in public, but that's life of a free faller. I never know where I'm going to be.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Shauna, are you able to share just now?
No, actually, I had to drive well where I was supposed to be drawing, but I loved Loki's story. The fire in the tree. I drew the image in my head.
Doing stuff in your head is a good place to start. Thanks very much. And Loki.
Well, I just drew a picture about the trail of the Maui going underground and hiding in the noni tree, and his father is tending to the taro, and grandfather with the fire, who he tricked into giving him to the fire, and then he brings the fire up and throws it into the tree and says a chant and brings the sticks over to the people, so all the people can now cook their food.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, great. So that's just a little sampler, a little beginning to forage in these forests of creative mythology. And I think you know well what we're about here and now. So maybe this is something you want to carry on with, maybe it's something you don't. And of course, you know, any kind of storytelling, working with stories, we're being creative, of course. But this is this other thing, and I find it really exciting, and I'm really happy to have shared it with you all. And if you do more, which you feel that this workshop is fed into, then let me know, please. I'd love to see more fruits of your work. And I love that's particularly that smile on your face, Loki, when you saw that picture from Tanya, like when you have given something to someone, and then like I get in school sometimes, I'll suddenly at the end of the day I'll get handed this massive like 40 pictures that the kids have all done based on the story. It's amazing, like, you know, seeing what people have created based on what you've offered them. It's such a wonderful thing. So yeah, keep them coming.
And it grounds it too at the same time, right? It grounds that story.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we'll just do that one round because we want to respect your time and respect what we had planned. So what we'll do now is just want to have a last little space for everybody to say something about how they found the workshop, any particular thing that they're taking away with them, before I hand back over to Leah to close. So just go around on my screen. So Shauna, please.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate your time. I think what I've taken away from this is just the creativity around not getting so much into your head, but you've given us some really great exercises to just be spontaneous. It was hard for me to do that tradition story in a fast, rapid pace. It felt disrespectful, but then I was thinking, no, like it doesn't always have to be about, it can be fun, like you're saying. And it's like, and I take everything so seriously. So I really appreciate that lesson on it being spontaneous and fun and lighthearted instead of it always have to be so serious. Which somehow I didn't realize I was being. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and your energy and your workshop. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for naming that, because it's a big thing and it happens so much in storytelling. I'm doing a show next Friday, a new piece, and I know it's this trap I've fallen into is because I love it and I've created it. I'm taking it really seriously. I know that I'm stuck in one zone in my telling of it, so I'm like, my plan in the next few days is to go into it and just start kind of basically taking the mickey out of myself and just finding bits to laugh at and go into that other zone with it. So yeah, that's such an important thing to be aware of while respecting the things that we respect and love. Thank you for mentioning that, and thank you for coming along, Sean. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Fairy Ann, please.
No, this was great. It's very on point for what I've been thinking about in terms of the story classes I'm taking with Leah and how to embark on the journey of reconnecting to my ancestral roots and what might be there to mine. So it's a really fun, playful mining experience. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Yeah, really great to have you here and to meet you. And Tanya, please.
For me, I have so many struggles around writing right now. One of them being, to me, I'm having a hard time accepting what the story actually is. I have a very narrow acceptance, not necessarily understanding, but acceptance of what the story is and what kind of stories I would like to tell. That, certain tools, exercises, knowledge that you have given us has put another crack in that my little shell, that my little cage that is around it. That was very helpful. I must say that if I had a chance to think about the exercise that we did, the rapid storytelling, I would find a way to get out of it. So that's for sure. Not having a chance to do it was, and I didn't burn, I didn't die at the end of it. So I know it's, next time perhaps it's going to be a little bit easier, but I am very grateful for everything that you have presented and for your spirit and for your knowledge and for your, the stories that you are giving us, because it definitely enriches our world. And also a little bit of that reconnection, making me think about, where actually are my roots and how very abandoned and dry they are right now. So that is definitely time to go back to reawaken that and hopefully become a little bit richer and fuller by going that. So I'm very grateful for everything for you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you so much for that. And yeah, keep pouring this water of your love and energy and attention upon the roots. And as long as you're doing it, as long as you keep coming back and doing something, it's happening, the work's happening. You're making your way forward. You just got to show up. So yeah, thank you for that. And Lucky.
Thank you so much. This I love your playful spirit around story and the fun that you've brought to storytelling. And the exercise that you gave us was really fun to tell the story as short as you can. And I like that idea of like 2 minute, 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, 5 minutes, and then you can kind of relax and tell the story. That's a great practice exercise. And like you're saying about what you're doing to prepare for presenting a story, that really is very helpful. And I loved you brought home to me again that I want to explore those withered roots as well of the cultures that I actually was born with And so it feels right too about the appropriation. And so I really should know my family roots as well. And yeah, it was so rich, so rich. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really enjoyed your presence here.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there and hand over to you, Leah.
Well, Daniel, thank you so, so much for this rich, thoughtful, playful, fun, provocative class. I'm just relishing the wake of what has been created here, and also the importance to be able to be irreverent with the stories. Like, they want to play us, why don't we play them too? And it's like that relationship of, like, one of the things I'm really taking away that you said is, like, you got that devotion to story, just love on it, and I really appreciate that. Tell us more about how we can stay in touch with you. You have a podcast, you have a school. What are ways that people can continue to stay connected to your storied way?
Sure, thank you for that. So podcast is a good place to start. So it's called House of Legends, and the episodes alternate between being a story from me and a guest episode where we have a chat and then the guest tells a story. Further on from that, I've got some books, of course. So we've got Finn and the Fianna, which is the Finn McCool cycle from Irish and Scottish mythology. Got the one which you've just heard about. So book one of the Orkney cycle. Second one's halfway written, and there'll be more to come there. And we have Scottish Myths and Legends, which is my most popular one, also available as an audiobook, and they're all also available as ebooks if you prefer that. And then I can never quite remember all the different things I do at this point, but I have an Instagram page, which is at House of Legends Podcast. I can put that in the chat. And then I have a school, which is kind of like what you're doing here. I think gathering together, we get in guests and we talk stories, we tell stories, we practice, we learn together. And a year-long intensive for those who really, really, really want to work really hard at becoming probably professional storytellers. And book coaching as well. I'm full up just now, but I just do 2 clients at a time because it's quite intensive coaching for people writing in the realms of fantasy and folklore and want a coach to oversee their work as they work on their books. Yeah, that's about me.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you to you all.
Such a pleasure. And may your time with your family be blessed. May it be filled with ease and grace, and your travel back to where you're living go smoothly and filled with ease. And thank you so much for watering the stories.
Thank you, Leah, for showing up even in a time of distress. Wishing you ease and grace and honoring your loved one.
The topic was apropos this morning. Okay. I will see you in the next chapter.
Good. Thank you, Daniel.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Daniel. Thank you, Leah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.